What happens when Hollywood's most calculated celebrity meets one of music's most authentic voices on live television? When carefully crafted image collides with genuine talent, the result isn't just uncomfortable television, it's explosive. Tonight, Kim Kardashian walked onto Jennifer Hudson's talk show expecting the usual soft treatment, the kind of interview where her brand remains untouched and her narrative stays controlled. But Jennifer Hudson had other plans. What began as polite conversation quickly spiraled into something far more dangerous for who's built in someone's empire on perception. The lights were warm, the set was pristine, and the audience was ready for another feel-good celebrity chat. What they got instead was a masterclass in what happens when authenticity meets artifice, and neither side backs down. The Jennifer Hudson show set gleamed under the perfectly calibrated studio lights. Everything about the atmosphere radiated warmth and professionalism. Jennifer sat behind her desk, radiating that genuine charm that had carried her from American Idol to Oscar winner to beloved talk show host. Her smile was real, her posture relaxed, her energy infectious. Across from her, Kim Kardashian settled into the guest chair with practiced precision. Her outfit was flawless, her makeup camera-ready, her hair styled to perfection. She crossed her legs with the kind of studied casualness that spoke of years in front of cameras. "Kim, welcome to the show," Jennifer said warmly, her voice carrying that rich tone that had made her a global sensation. "Thank you so much for being here. I know our audience has been excited about this." Kim's smile was immediate and bright, the kind of expression that had graced countless magazine covers. "Thank you for having me, Jennifer. I'm such a huge fan of yours. Your voice, your talent, everything you've accomplished. It's truly inspiring." The words came out smoothly, rehearsed, but delivered with enough warmth to sound genuine. Jennifer nodded graciously, though something in her expression suggested she was listening to more than just the words. "Well, that's very sweet of you to say," Jennifer replied. "And speaking of accomplishments, you've certainly built quite an empire yourself. Fashion, beauty, television, business ventures. How do you manage it all?" Kim leaned forward slightly, her voice taking on that familiar tone of practiced confidence. "You know, Jennifer, it's all about passion. When you're passionate about what you do, it doesn't feel like work. Everything I touch comes from a genuine desire to create, to innovate, to connect with people." Her hands moved expressively as she spoke, every gesture designed to emphasize her points. Jennifer's eyebrows raised slightly, though her smile remained warm. "Passion, absolutely. That's something I can relate to. But I'm curious about something. You've mentioned creating and innovating. What would you say your greatest creative contribution has been?" The question hung in the air for just a moment longer than comfortable. Kim's smile flickered, almost imperceptibly, before returning full force. "Well, I think I've revolutionized how people think about business, about branding. I've shown that you can build something substantial from nothing, that you can create opportunities where others see obstacles." "From nothing," Jennifer repeated thoughtfully, her tone still warm but carrying a subtle edge. "That's interesting. Some might argue that having a famous family, connections in Hollywood, and financial resources isn't exactly starting from nothing. How would you respond to that?" The audience shifted slightly, sensing the temperature change in the conversation. Kim's laugh was light, but her posture stiffened just enough to be noticeable. "Jennifer, everyone has advantages and disadvantages. The difference is what you do with them. I could have sat back and done nothing with the opportunities I had. Instead, I worked to build something meaningful." Jennifer nodded slowly, her fingers drumming lightly on her desk. "Work, absolutely. I respect that. But when you say meaningful, I'm wondering what you mean by that. What impact do you feel you've had beyond building wealth and fame?" Kim's eyes narrowed slightly, though her smile never wavered. "Impact businesses that? I've created jobs, I've built employ thousands of people. I've influenced fashion, beauty standards, social media. I've shown young women that they can be entrepreneurs, that they can build their own success." Her voice carried a defensive edge now, though she tried to mask it with enthusiasm. "That's certainly one way to look at it," Jennifer said carefully. "But some critics would argue that your influence on beauty standards has been more problematic than positive. The pressure on young women to achieve unrealistic physical ideals, the promotion of cosmetic procedures, the emphasis on appearance over substance. Do you ever consider those concerns?" The question landed like a stone in still water. Kim's smile tightened, her hands clasping together in her lap. Critics will always find something to complain about, Jennifer. I've never forced anyone to do anything. I've simply been honest about my choices, and if people choose to follow that, it's their decision. Jennifer leaned forward slightly, her voice still gentle but more pointed now. But with great influence comes great responsibility, doesn't it? When you have millions of followers, especially young, impressionable ones, don't you think there's an obligation to consider the message you're sending? Kim's laugh was shorter this time, less warm. I think people give me too much credit and too much blame. I'm not responsible for other people's choices, Jennifer. I'm responsible for my own life, my own decisions, my own family. The audience murmured softly, sensing the shift in dynamics. Jennifer's expression remained pleasant, but her eyes had sharpened. Your family, yes, that's been central to your brand from the beginning. The reality show, the public relationships, the documented personal moments. Some might say you've monetized privacy itself. How do you balance sharing your life with protecting what should remain personal? Kim's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. Balance is something every public figure struggles with. But I've always been authentic about my life, about my experiences. People appreciate that honesty. Authentic, Jennifer repeated, letting the word hang in the air. That's interesting, because some would argue that reality television, by its very nature, isn't authentic. It's edited, produced, crafted for entertainment. When you say you're being authentic, are you talking about the person or the character? The question hit its mark. Kim's composure wavered for just a moment, her media training battling against the instinct to defend herself. I resent the implication that I'm playing a character, Jennifer. What you see is who I am. I don't pretend to be something I'm not. Jennifer's smile remained, but it had taken on a different quality. I'm not trying to insult you, Kim. I'm just trying to understand. As someone who's worked in entertainment, who's seen how the industry works, I know the difference between performance and reality, and I'm curious about where you draw that line. Kim shifted in her chair, her perfectly composed facade beginning to show hairline cracks. I don't draw lines, Jennifer. I live my life, and cameras happen to capture parts of it. That's not performance, that's documentation. Documentation, Jennifer mused. So when the cameras are rolling during family arguments, during relationship drama, during personal crises, that's just documentation. Not entertainment designed to drive ratings and revenue? The words were delivered with surgical precision, polite but pointed. Kim's eyes flashed, though she tried to maintain her composure. Everything in life can be turned into entertainment if you want to see it that way. But for me, those moments are real. The emotions are real. The experiences are real. Jennifer leaned back in her chair, her gaze steady. I don't doubt the emotions are real, Kim. What I'm questioning is the choice to package and sell those real emotions to the highest bidder. As an artist, as someone who's poured genuine emotion into my work, I find that concerning. The gloves were off now. The polite veneer of the celebrity interview had given way to something more substantial, more dangerous for someone whose entire brand depended on controlling the narrative. Kim's smile had become strained, her voice carrying a sharper edge. That's an interesting perspective, Jennifer, coming from someone in the entertainment industry. Aren't you also packaging and selling emotion? Isn't that what music is? Jennifer's eyebrows rose, and for the first time, her warm demeanor cooled noticeably. There's a difference between creating art that expresses emotion and exploiting personal trauma for profit. I think most people can see that distinction. The audience was silent now, sensing they were witnessing something far more intense than the usual celebrity chat. Kim's carefully constructed image was being challenged in real time, and her responses were becoming more defensive, more revealing of the person beneath the brand. Jennifer Hudson, meanwhile, sat with the quiet confidence of someone who had earned their place through talent rather than notoriety and wasn't about to be impressed by manufactured fame. The tension in the studio was palpable. What had begun as a routine interview was transforming into something unprecedented, a collision between two very different approaches to fame, success, and authenticity. And everyone watching knew this was only the beginning. The silence stretched between them like a taut wire ready to snap. Kim's perfectly manicured fingers drummed against her thigh, a subtle tell that her media training hadn't quite managed to eliminate. Jennifer sat motionless, her gaze unwavering, the kind of steady look that had served her well through years of genuine performance and hard-earned respect. You know what, Jennifer? Kim finally said, her voice carrying a new edge. I think you're being a little unfair here. You're acting like I'm some kind of fraud when I've built legitimate businesses, created jobs, supported my family. Her tone had shifted from polished to pointed, the careful PR speak giving way to something more raw. Jennifer's expression didn't change, but her voice carried a quiet strength. I'm not calling you a fraud, Kim. I'm asking you to be honest about what you've built and how you built it. There's a difference between creating something and capitalizing on something. She paused, letting the words settle. And I think that distinction matters. Kim leaned forward, her composure slipping further. Honest? You want honest? Fine. I've worked harder than most people will ever work. I've sacrificed privacy, normalcy, peace of mind. Everything I have, I've earned through blood, sweat, and tears. Her voice rose slightly, the careful modulation giving way to genuine frustration. Blood, sweat, and tears, Jennifer repeated softly. That's something I can understand. But Kim, and I say this with respect, there's a difference between working hard and working for something meaningful. What you've described sounds like the cost of fame, not the price of contribution. Her words were measured, deliberate, each one chosen for maximum impact. The audience shifted uncomfortably. This wasn't the light entertainment they'd expected. This was becoming a philosophical nature of celebrity debate about the itself, and Kim was clearly losing ground with each exchange. Kim's laugh was brittle now, devoid of the warmth she'd started with. Contribution? Jennifer, I've contributed more to popular culture than most people ever will. I've influenced fashion, beauty, social media, business practices. That's not nothing. Her hands gestured emphatically, trying to reclaim control of the narrative. Popular culture, Jennifer mused. Is that the same as culture? Because where I come from, culture is about art, about music that moves people, about stories that change lives, about performances that touch souls. What you're describing sounds more like commerce disguised as culture. The words landed with surgical precision. Kim's facade cracked visibly. Her perfectly applied makeup couldn't hide the flush creeping up her neck, the tension in her jaw, the way her breathing had become slightly moored. You're being rappy, incredibly condescending, Jennifer. Just because your path was different doesn't make it more valid than mine. Jennifer shook her head slowly. I'm not being condescending. I'm being honest. And honesty seems to make you uncomfortable, which I find interesting given how much you talk about authenticity. She leaned forward slightly. Tell me something, Kim. When was the last time you did something that wasn't filmed, photographed, or documented for public consumption? The question hung in the air like smoke. Kim opened her mouth, then closed it, searching for an answer that wouldn't further damage her position. Privacy isn't about hiding from cameras, she said finally. It's about maintaining boundaries. Boundaries, Jennifer repeated, like the boundary between your children's faces and your social media posts, like the boundary between your personal relationships and your reality show storylines, like the boundary between genuine emotion and manufactured drama. Each question was delivered with the same gentle tone, but the cumulative effect was devastating. Kim's composure shattered completely. She sat up straighter, her voice sharp with indignation. How dare you bring my children into this? How dare you question my parenting, my choices as a mother? Her carefully controlled image was dissolving in real time. Jennifer's expression softened slightly, but her resolve didn't waver. I'm not questioning your love for your children, Kim. I'm questioning the wisdom of building a brand around them before they're old enough to consent to that exposure. As a mother myself, I think that's a fair concern. You don't know anything about my relationship with my children, Kim snapped, her voice rising to a level that made the audience visibly uncomfortable. You don't know the sacrifices I make, the protection I provide, the love I give them every single day. I'm sure you love them, Jennifer said quietly, but love and exploitation aren't mutually exclusive. You can love someone and still make choices that prioritize profit over their well-being. That's not an accusation, Kim. That's a reality many people in our industry face. Kim's eyes flashed with fury. Exploitation? You're calling me an exploiter? You sit there in your ivory tower, judging me, when you don't know the first thing about my life, my struggles, my reality. Her voice cracked slightly on the last word. Jennifer's response was calm, measured. I know what I see. I see someone who's turned personal pain into public entertainment, who's monetized family dysfunction, who's built an empire on the foundation of other people's attention and validation. And I see someone who's convinced herself that's the same thing as accomplishment. The studio was dead silent. Even the crew members had stopped their quiet movements, transfixed by the verbal battle unfolding before them. Kim's breathing was audible now, her chest rising and falling rapidly as she struggled to maintain some semblance of control. "You think you're better than me," Kim said finally, her voice low and dangerous. "You think because you can sing, because you won some awards, because you came from nothing, that makes you superior. But you're just another entertainer, Jennifer. You're just another person selling emotion for money." Jennifer's smile was sad rather than angry. "The difference, Kim, is that I create the emotion I sell. I don't harvest it from my family's trauma. I don't package my children's childhood for public consumption. I don't turn my relationships into content." She paused. "I make music. You make drama. And you've convinced yourself they're the same thing." Kim shot to her feet, the movement so sudden it made several audience members gasp. "This interview is over," she declared, her voice shaking with rage and humiliation. "I won't sit here and be attacked by someone who clearly has an agenda." Jennifer remained seated, her expression unchanged. "Sitting down and having an honest conversation isn't an attack, Kim. It's what interviews used to be before they became promotional opportunities." Her voice carried a note of sadness. "But if honesty feels like an attack to you, maybe that says more about your position than mine." Kim's hands shook as she reached for her purse, her carefully constructed world crumbling around her. "You'll regret this," she hissed. "You'll regret treating me this way." But even as she spoke, everyone in the room could see that she was the one filled with regret, caught completely off guard by an interviewer who refused to play by the unspoken rules of celebrity promotion. "The only thing I regret," Jennifer said softly as Kim began moving toward the exit, "is that you can't see the difference between being famous and being significant." The words followed Kim as she stormed off the set, her heels clicking against the floor in a staccato rhythm of defeat. The cameras continued rolling as Kim disappeared behind the stage curtains, capturing every moment of her retreat. Jennifer turned back to face the audience and the cameras, her expression thoughtful rather than triumphant. The confrontation had revealed something fundamental about the nature of modern celebrity, and everyone watching knew they had witnessed something historic. The studio frozen remained in stunned silence as the echo of Kim's departure faded. Jennifer Hudson sat composed at her desk, her hands folded calmly, watching the exit where one of the world's most famous women had just fled in humiliation. The audience didn't dare move, afraid to break the spell of what they'd witnessed. Even the cameramen seemed transfixed, their equipment still rolling, capturing every second of the aftermath. Jennifer turned slowly back to face the cameras, her expression thoughtful but resolute. She took a measured breath before speaking, her voice carrying the same quiet authority that had dismantled Kim's carefully constructed facade. "Well," she said softly, "I suppose that's one way to end a conversation." A few nervous chuckles rippled through the audience, but most remained silent, processing what they'd just seen. "You know," Jennifer continued, leaning back in her chair with the ease of someone completely comfortable in their own skin, "I've been in this industry for a long time. I've seen people come and go, I've watched careers rise and fall, and I've learned to tell the difference between substance and spectacle." Her voice carried a weight that commanded attention. "What you just witnessed wasn't me being cruel or unfair. It was me asking the kinds of questions that used to be normal in interviews before celebrity became more important than character." She paused, letting her words settle over the stunned studio. "I've worked with some of the most talented, genuine people in entertainment. I've also worked with people who've forgotten that fame to be is supposed byproduct of contribution, not the goal itself." Her tone remained gentle, but her message was crystal clear. "And I can tell the difference." The audience began to stir slightly, some nodding in agreement, others still processing the magnitude of what had just unfolded. Jennifer's producer approached from the side of the stage, his face a mixture of panic and excitement. She held up a hand, signaling that she wasn't finished. "I want to be clear about something," Jennifer said, her gaze returning to the cameras. "I don't take pleasure in making anyone uncomfortable. But I do believe in accountability, especially for those of us who've been given platforms and influence." She stood from her desk, moving to the front of the stage with the natural grace that had carried her through countless performances. "When you build an empire on other people's attention, when you turn your family's private moments into public entertainment, when you influence millions of young people to chase fame over fulfillment, you open yourself up to questions, real questions, hard questions, questions that go beyond your latest business venture or fashion choice. The studio lights seemed to focus more intensely on her as she spoke, highlighting the conviction in her expression. I've been fortunate enough to work in industry where talent and still matters, where authenticity still has value, where creating something meaningful is more important than creating something viral. Her voice grew stronger with each word, and I refuse to pretend that all paths to fame are equal, that all forms of influence are valid, that all ways of building a career deserve the same respect. She walked closer to the audience, her presence filling the space Kim had vacated with her dramatic exit. Someone asked me before we started filming today whether I was nervous about interviewing Kim Kardashian, and I said no, I wasn't nervous. I was curious. A slight smile played at the corners of her mouth. I was curious to see if there was substance beneath the surface, if there was genuine purpose behind the publicity machine, if there was real wisdom behind the wealth. The audience leaned forward, hanging on her every word. Jennifer's voice took on a more personal tone, the kind of intimacy that made her such a compelling performer. And what I discovered is what I suspected all along. When you strip away the cameras, the makeup, the carefully crafted image, the manufactured drama, what's left is someone who's built everything on foundation of other people's fascination rather than their own authentic contribution. She returned to her desk, settling back into her chair with the confident ease of someone who had just proven an important point. I've won awards, yes. I've sold records, yes. I've acted in movies, yes. But more importantly, I've touched people's lives through my art. I've made music that comforts people in their darkest moments. I've told stories that inspire others to chase their dreams. I've used my voice, literally and figuratively, to lift people up rather than exploit their attention. The conviction in her words was unmistakable, each sentence delivered with the kind of authenticity that Kim had claimed to possess but failed to demonstrate. That's the difference between being famous and being significant. That's the difference between building a brand and building a legacy. That's the difference between demanding respect and earning it. Jennifer glanced toward the exit where Kim had disappeared, her expression more sad than triumphant. I genuinely hoped that conversation would go differently. I hoped she would surprise me, that she would show some self-awareness, some genuine reflection about the impact she's had on our culture. She shook her head slowly. Instead, what I saw was someone so insulated by yes men and sycophants that she's forgotten how to have a real conversation about real issues. The audience began to applaud, slowly at first, then building to a thunderous ovation that seemed to shake the very foundations of the studio. Jennifer raised her hand, quieting them gently. I don't want applause for what just happened. What I want is for people watching at home to think critically about who they choose to elevate, who they choose to emulate, who they choose to give their attention and admiration to. She leaned forward, her voice dropping to a more intimate level. Because here's the truth that Kim Kardashian and people like her don't want you to understand. Your attention is valuable. Your admiration is precious. Your influence on your own friends and family matters more than any celebrity's influence on strangers. The words carried the weight of hard-earned wisdom. Don't waste those gifts on people who see you as a commodity rather than a human being. The studio remained captivated as Jennifer continued to speak, her natural charisma filling the space left by Kim's manufactured presence. I've been blessed with a voice that can move people, and I've tried to use that gift responsibly. I've tried to create music that heals rather than hurts, that builds rather than destroys, that inspires rather than exploits. Her eyes seemed to look directly through the cameras to the viewers at home, and I've tried to live my life in a way that would make my grandmother proud, that would set a good example for young people watching, that would contribute something meaningful to the world. She stood once more, moving to center stage with the commanding presence that had made her a star. What happened here tonight wasn't about me versus Kim Kardashian. It was about substance versus spectacle. It was about authenticity versus artifice. It was about the difference between earning your place and buying your way in. Her voice rose with passionate conviction. And I think everyone watching can see which side of that divide each of us falls on. The audience erupted again, this time with genuine enthusiasm rather than nervous energy. Jennifer's words had struck a chord, tapping into something deeper than celebrity gossip or entertainment drama. She had articulated what many people felt but couldn't express about the current state of fame and influence in American culture. I want to end with this thought, Jennifer said as the applause died down. True success isn't measured by how many people know your name. It's measured by how many people are better off because you existed. It's not about how much money you make or how many followers you have. It's about what you create, what you contribute, what you leave behind that makes the world a little bit better than you found it. She paused, letting the weight of her words settle over the studio. The cameras captured every nuance of her expression, the quiet dignity that had carried her through this unprecedented confrontation. And by that measure, I sleep well at night knowing that my voice has comforted people, my performances have inspired people, and my example has shown young artists that talent and hard work still matter more than publicity and manipulation. The lights began to dim slightly, signaling the end of what would undoubtedly become one of the most talked about interviews in television history. But Jennifer wasn't finished. She had one more point to make, one final observation that would cement her victory in this battle of philosophies. You see, Jennifer said, her voice carrying the authority of someone who had earned every ounce of respect she commanded, there's something that people like Kim don't understand about real influence. Real influence isn't about getting people to buy what you're selling. It's about inspiring them to become better versions of themselves. Her gaze swept across the audience, connecting with faces that reflected a mixture of admiration and understanding. When I was growing up, struggling to make ends meet, dreaming of something bigger, the artists I looked up to weren't famous for being famous. They were famous because they had something to say, something to give, something that mattered beyond their bank accounts. Her voice took on the warmth of personal memory, drawing the audience deeper into her world. They didn't manufacture drama to stay relevant. They created beauty to stay meaningful. She walked to the edge of the stage, her presence commanding without demanding, powerful without being pushy. What you witnessed tonight was someone who's never had to defend the substance of her work because there isn't any substance to defend. Strip away the cameras, the controversy, the carefully orchestrated publicity, and what remains is an empty shell painted to look important. The words weren't delivered with malice, but with the kind of matter-of-fact clarity that made them even more devastating. I've interviewed countless people on this show. Politicians, activists, fellow artists, business leaders, people from all walks of life. And I can tell you that the ones who make the biggest impact are rarely the ones who make the most noise. Jennifer's tone carried the wisdom of someone who had seen behind the curtain of fame and found it wanting. They're the ones who show up consistently, who do the work when nobody's watching, who measure their success by the positive change they create rather than the attention they generate. The studio remained completely silent, every person present understanding that they were witnessing more than just the aftermath of a celebrity confrontation. They were seeing a masterclass in dignity, in how to handle conflict with grace while still standing firm in one's principles. Jennifer's composure throughout the entire exchange had been remarkable, never losing her temper, never stooping to personal attacks, simply asking questions that revealed the truth. I want young people watching this to understand something crucial, Jennifer continued, her voice taking on an almost maternal quality. The path to genuine success, to lasting fulfillment, to real respect, isn't through shortcuts or manufactured drama or exploiting your personal life for profit. It's through developing your talents, contributing something meaningful to the world, and treating others with the dignity you want to receive. She returned to her desk, settling into her chair with the same natural ease she'd maintained throughout the entire ordeal. Kim Kardashian came here tonight expecting to be treated like royalty, to have her narrative accepted without question, to promote her latest ventures without any real scrutiny. What she encountered instead was journalism, real journalism, the kind where questions have follow-ups and statements require evidence and claims demand accountability, your mere app. The audience began to move, sensing that Jennifer was building toward something significant. Her eyes sparkled with the same intensity that had made her such a compelling performer, but now channeled toward a different kind of stage. And when faced with that level of honest inquiry, when confronted with the gap between her public image and her actual contributions, she did what people do when they have no real defense. She got angry, she ran, she got defensive, in a way. Jennifer's laugh was gentle but pointed, the kind of sound that conveyed understanding rather than mockery. I don't blame her for being uncomfortable. Most people would be uncomfortable if someone started asking hard questions about the foundation of their entire identity. But that discomfort is exactly why those questions need to be asked. Because influence without accountability is just manipulation with better marketing. She glanced at her notes, though it was clear she didn't need them. The words were coming from a place of deep conviction, the kind of authenticity that couldn't be scripted or manufactured. I've been thinking a lot lately about what we've lost as a culture, about how we've confused celebrity with achievement, notoriety with nobility, viral moments with valuable contributions. And tonight's conversation crystallized something for me. The camera zoomed in slightly, catching the intensity in her expression as she prepared to deliver what would become the most quoted portion of the entire interview. We've created a system where the people with the least to offer are given the biggest platforms, where the loudest voices drown out the most meaningful ones, where style is valued sensation more than substance and more than significance. Her voice grew stronger with each word, building to a crescendo that would resonate long after the camera stopped rolling. But here's what people like Kim don't realize, Jennifer said, leaning forward with the confidence of someone who had lived every word she was speaking. That system is fragile. It depends entirely on people's willingness to participate in the illusion, to accept the manufactured drama as reality, to mistake publicity for importance. And more people are waking up to the difference. She gestured toward the empty chair where Kim had sat just minutes earlier, the visual reminder of the confront weight to her words. What Asian adding happened tonight wasn't just one person walking out of an interview. It was the collapse of a carefully constructed facade when it met genuine scrutiny. It was the moment when the emperor's new clothes were revealed for what they really are. Nothing. The audience erupted in sustained applause, but Jennifer held up her hand, indicating she wasn't finished. The gesture was subtle but commanding, the kind of natural authority that couldn't be taught or faked. I want to be clear about something else. I don't take pleasure in anyone's discomfort. I don't enjoy making people squirm or feel small or exposed. But I do believe in truth. I believe in holding people accountable for the influence they wield and the messages they send. Her expression softened slightly, showing the compassion that had always been at the heart of her appeal. Kim Kardashian has millions of followers, mostly young women who look to her for guidance about success, about beauty, about what it means to matter in this world. And the message she sends, consciously or not, is that your value comes from other people's attention, that your worth is measured by your ability to generate buzz, that your purpose is to be watched rather than to contribute. The studio remained transfixed as Jennifer articulated what many had felt but struggled to express. Her ability to cut through the noise and speak to fundamental truths was on full display, demonstrating why she had earned such widespread respect across different industries and demographics. That's not just wrong, she continued, it's dangerous, because it teaches people to focus on being seen rather than on being valuable, on getting attention rather than on deserving it. She stood once more, moving with the fluid grace that had made her such a captivating performer, but now channeling that same energy toward a different kind of performance altogether. Real success, lasting success, meaningful success comes from developing something inside yourself that's worth sharing with the world. A talent, a skill, a perspective, a gift that makes other people's lives better in some way. Jennifer's voice took on the rich, resonant quality that had made her famous, but the message was more important than the medium. When you have that, when you've built something real, when you've earned your place through genuine contribution, then you don't need to manufacture drama to stay relevant. You don't need to exploit your family's private moments for content. You don't need to turn every personal crisis into a publicity opportunity. The conviction in her words was absolute, each sentence delivered with the kind of certainty that comes from lived experience and hard-won wisdom. You simply show up, do the work, and let the results speak for themselves. That's what I've tried to do throughout my career. That's what every artist, entrepreneur, leader, or creator worth respecting has done. And that's what separates those who build legacies from those who simply generate headlines. She paused, allowing the weight of her message to settle over the studio. The silence wasn't uncomfortable now, it was reverent, the kind of quiet that follows a powerful performance or a profound revelation. Everyone present understood that they had witnessed something special, something that transcended the usual boundaries of celebrity interviews or entertainment television. So to anyone watching at home, especially young people trying to figure out their path in life, I want you to remember this moment, Jennifer said, her voice carrying the warmth and authority of a mentor speaking to beloved students. Remember that when substance meets spectacle, substance wins. When authenticity encounters artifice, authenticity prevails. When real accomplishment faces manufactured fame, there's no contest. Her smile returned, genuine and warm, the expression of someone who had just proven an important point not through cruelty or manipulation, but through simple, honest conversation. Don't waste your time chasing other people's attention. Invest your energy in developing something worth their respect. Don't measure your worth by how many people are watching you. Measure it by how many people are better off because of what you've created. The audience rose to their feet, applause thundering through the studio with an intensity that seemed to shake the very foundations of the building. But Jennifer's expression remained humble, gracious. The look of someone who understood real victory wasn't in the applause or the viral clips that would inevitably follow. The real victory was in speaking truth to power, in holding influence accountable, in demonstrating that dignity and authenticity could still triumph over publicity and manipulation. As the applause continued, Jennifer took a small bow, acknowledging the audience's enthusiasm, while maintaining the composed grace that had carried her through one of the most extraordinary interviews in television history. The cameras continued to roll, capturing every moment of what would become a cultural touchstone, a reference point for discussions about celebrity, influence, and the difference between being famous and being significant. The lights dimmed slowly as Jennifer Hudson looked directly into the camera one final time, her expression serene but resolute. Tonight, you witnessed something that doesn't happen often in modern media. You saw what occurs when someone who's built their entire identity on manufactured drama meets someone who believes in substance over spectacle. Her voice carried the quiet authority of someone who had just proven an unshakable point. Kim Kardashian walked out of here tonight, but the questions she couldn't answer remain. And those questions matter because they're about more than celebrity gossip or entertainment drama. They're about what we value as a culture, what we reward with our attention, and what kind of influence we allow to shape the minds of the next generation. She paused, her gaze steady and unwavering. If you found yourself nodding along tonight, if you recognize the difference between earning respect and demanding it, then share this video. Let people know that substance still matters, that authenticity still has power, and that real success is measured by contribution, not controversy. Hit that subscribe button if you believe truth should triumph over publicity, and ring the notification bell so you never miss another moment when artifice meets accountability. Because as long as there are people willing to ask hard questions, there will always be hope that substance can prevail over spectacle.